The desert was not a place meant for the living. It was a kingdom of silence where the sun ruled mercilessly and the earth cracked in submission beneath its reign. To be cast out into it alone was a death sentence, and Elena knew it the moment. The horses thundered away, leaving her in a storm of dust. The betrayal had come swiftly, like a knife between the ribs. Only days before, she had trusted them, the men who rode beside her. They had promised her safety, protection on the long journey west. Soldiers, merchants, a scattering of rough-faced frontiersmen, she had felt them allies, or at least companions bound by necessity. She had offered them her skill in reading, maps, her endurance, her few precious supplies. But trust was a fragile thing, easily broken. The leader of the group, a tall, sharp-eyed man named Briggs, had smiled when she asked why they had turned from the established trail. She remembered the grin now, a flash of teeth that carried no warmth. "Shortcut," he had said. "Don't fret yourself, girl." By the time she realized the truth, that they were abandoning her, it was too late. Briggs had dismounted, yanked her from her horse, and left her coughing in the sand. His grip had been rough, his words cruel. "You're dead weight, Elena. More trouble than you're worth. The desert will deal with you." She had struggled, pleaded, demanded to know why. But her only answer was laughter and the hard crack of leather reins as they spurred their mounts forward. She had screamed until her throat burned, watching them vanish like spirits into the horizon dot, and then there was silence. The silence of the desert was not gentle. It pressed against her ears, a suffocating reminder of how truly alone she was. The vastness around her was endless sand and stone stretching to the edges of the sky, broken only by jagged mesas and the shimmer of heat. The world seemed to mock her, whispering that she would die nameless here, bones scattered for the coyotes. Her wrists burned where the ropes bit into her skin. Briggs had tied her well, though not cruelly. Why waste energy on cruelty when the desert itself would do the work? She struggled against the bonds, twisting and straining until her skin was raw. At last, with a grunt and a desperate jerk, one wrist slipped free. She tore the rest loose, the fibers snapping with a sound louder than her heartbeat. But freedom meant little without water. The canteen they had left her was empty, deliberately so. The sun overhead was relentless, a molten hammer striking her down. Already, sweat drenched her skin, running into her eyes, stinging. Each breath tasted of dust. She scanned the horizon, searching for the faintest trace of shade, of movement, of salvation. Nothing. Her mind betrayed her then, wandering back to memories she had buried deep. Memories of a different life, a different choice. A time when her heart had belonged to someone who would never have abandoned her to the desert. Koa. The name surfaced unbidden, carried on the dry wind like a forgotten prayer. An Apache warrior, fierce and unyielding, yet gentle with her in ways that still haunted her. She had loved him once, truly loved him, but had turned away when family and duty demanded it. She had told herself it was impossible, that their worlds could never join. But as she lay beneath the brutal sky, alone and forsaken, she wondered if her choice had doomed her to this fate. She staggered to her feet, her legs trembling. Every step was agony, the sand shifting treacherously beneath her boots. She told herself she must keep moving, that somewhere there had to be water, shade, anything. But the horizon never changed. Hours bled together. The sun crawled across the sky, and the heat thickened until it was a living weight pressing down upon her. When she fell, it was not with drama but with exhaustion. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed face first into the sand. Her lips cracked. As she gasped for air, her tongue swollen. The desert had claimed many before her. It would claim her too. And yet, even as her vision blurred and darkness edged her thoughts, a flicker of defiance stirred within her. She was not ready to surrender. She would not let Briggs's betrayal be her end. The desert whispered death, but somewhere in the depths of her fading consciousness, another voice rose, softer, stronger. Koa's voice echoing from memory. Stand, Elena. Even the desert bends to those who refuse to bow. And so she tried. Her body shook with the effort as she dragged herself across the burning earth, clinging to life by the thinnest thread of will. The sun lowered, shadows lengthened, and still she crawled, not knowing if salvation lay ahead or only more endless sand. What she did not know, what she could not yet see, was that far beyond the heat shimmer, a warrior's eyes had already found her. The desert was patient. It had no need to hurry. Death here did not always come swiftly. Sometimes it came with a slow tightening of the throat, a hollow ache that grew heavier with every step, every breath. Elena was learning this lesson hour by hour, the truth of it burning into her bones. She had managed to rise after collapsing in the sand, but her strength was already fraying. Each step forward felt like wading through a sea of heat and emptiness. Her boots filled with grit, rubbing her feet raw, but she dared not stop. Stopping meant surrender. Stopping meant letting Briggs and his men win. The sun had begun its slow descent across the sky, but that brought little comfort. The desert at midday was merciless, but at twilight it became cruel in another way. The air, once blistering hot, shifted to sharp chill, sinking its claws into her sweat-soaked skin. Every breath was a knife, every gust of wind a reminder of how exposed she was. Her thirst clawed at her worst of all. It was not just dryness, it was pain. Her throat felt scraped raw, her lips split and bleeding. She remembered the water skin Briggs had taken from her, remembered the mocking tilt of his head when she had begged for it. Water's for men who'll use it, he had sneered. Not for girls who slow us down. The memory festered like poison. Rage and fear tangled inside her, but rage at least gave her a reason to keep moving. The landscape offered no mercy. Towering rocks loomed like watchmen, their shadows stretching long and sharp across the sands. Thorny brush clung to the ground, too stubborn to wither, each bush bristling with spines. Once she thought she glimpsed the green promise of cactus. Fruit, but when she stumbled closer it was withered, hollow, and useless. Her body began to betray her. Her legs trembled with each step and her head swam. Strange shapes shimmered at the edge of her vision pools of water, tense. The flicker of firelight, but they dissolved whenever she blinked. Mirage after mirage, each one taunting her with what she craved most. Still, she pushed on. By the time the stars began to prick the sky, Elena's strength was a fragile thread. She collapsed again, this time on a patch of hard-packed earth between two jagged stones. She curled into herself, shivering as the night's cold sank its teeth into her. That was when the sounds began. At first, it was a soft rustle like leaves in the wind, but there were no leaves here. Then came the low growl, so faint she thought it might be her imagination. Her breath hitched as her gaze darted into the shadows. Yellow eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Coyotes. They circled at a distance. Cautious, curious. She knew what they were waiting for. The desert taught its predators patience, too. The coyotes would not strike while she could still fight. But if she faltered, if she grew weaker still, they would come. She scrabbled at the ground, her hands closing around a jagged stone. It was pitiful, hardly a weapon, but she clutched it tight, baring her teeth in a silent challenge. Not yet, she rasped, her voice a cracked whisper. Not yet, you devils. The coyotes lingered, their eyes flickering like embers in the dark before slinking back into the night. But their absence gave her no peace. They would return. Alone again, Elena pressed her forehead to the ground, the stone still clutched in her hand. She prayed not with words, but with the desperate beat of her heart. She prayed to survive the night, to see the sunrise, to find a chance at water. Had hoped out, and once more her mind betrayed her, drifting to Koa. She could see his face as clear as if he stood above her now, strong and unyielding, eyes like storm clouds. She remembered his words, his quiet conviction when he told her the land itself spoke if one listened. She had laughed then, dismissing it. Now she wished she had listened. The desert whispered around her. Not words, not yet, but something deeper. A reminder that she was alive, however barely. That as long as her heart beat, she was not defeated. So she clung to that fragile thread of life, trembling, starving, parched. The desert would test her, strip her of everything but will. And if she survived, if she would not be the same woman Briggs had abandoned. For in the cruel trial of the desert, the weak perished. Only the strong endured. And Elena, though her body faltered, swore she would endure. Exhaustion had a way of opening the mind to memories long buried, and as Elena staggered through the desert's harsh embrace, her thoughts drifted inevitably to Koa. He had been the sun to her shadow, the constant in a world that demanded compromise and duty. And yet, just as the desert now tested her body, the memory of him tested her heart. She remembered the first time she saw him, not as a warrior, but as a young man moving through the village with a quiet strength that drew the eye. Without effort. He had been cautious, respectful, but there was a spark there. A fire in his gaze that matched the one she felt inside herself. They had laughed together, argued, shared secrets she would have trusted with no one else. For a fleeting moment, it seemed that two worlds so different and divided could somehow touch, but society's rules and her family's expectations had made their love impossible. Elena had tried to bury her feelings, to tell herself it was a fantasy that could never survive daylight. And yet, every stolen glance, every small kindness from Koa had made the lie harder to maintain. She had loved him fiercely, hopelessly. And in her heart, she knew he had loved her in return. In the desert's punishing solitude, the memories returned like a tide. She could almost hear his voice whispering in the wind, telling her to hold fast, to survive. She could feel the warmth of his hands, steady and sure, guiding her, teaching her to read the land in ways she had never known before. In a flash of delirium, she imagined him appearing at the edge of the horizon, striding toward her with calm determination and eyes that saw into the very depths of her soul. Regret gnawed at her as sharply as the sun burned her skin. How many times had she wondered what might have been if she had chosen differently? If she had followed her heart instead of duty? The desert now seemed to mock her indecision, every grain of sand a reminder of the time she had lost. She cursed herself quietly, her voice swallowed by the vast silence around her. If only I had stayed. If only I had trusted love instead of fear. Her steps faltered as the shadows lengthened. The desert, which had seemed infinite and empty, now pressed closer with its silence. Every memory of Koa was a bittersweet torment, his kindness, his strength, his unwavering courage. The thought of him warmed her spirit even as her body weakened, and it gave her a fragile kind of hope. Perhaps it was foolish. Perhaps it was a dream she would never reach. But in that hope lay the only force that could drive her onward. Elena's mind wandered to the moments they had shared that had seemed inconsequential at the time. The way he would gather herbs to ease her headaches, the patient way he had taught her to track water sources in the wilderness, the gentle way he had touched her hand when fear made her tremble. Each memory was a thread, connecting her to life and to a past she thought she had abandoned forever. But reality intruded sharply. She was alone, abandoned by those she had trusted, and the desert around her offered no mercy. The echoes of Koa's presence, real or imagined, became a lifeline rather than a comfort. If she was to survive this trial, she would need to summon the courage they had once shared, the patience, the resilience, the quiet determination he had instilled in her. As night fell and the temperature plummeted, she curled into herself, shivering, the memories of Koa wrapping around her like a protective cloak. His voice seemed to rise from the darkness itself. "Elena, you are stronger than you know. Do not give in. Do not let the desert claim you. I will find you." Whether it was a memory, a wish, or a premonition, it gave her the strength to rise. Once more, she pressed on through the cold, every step a test of will. The desert was a relentless teacher, but even in its cruelty, it reminded her that she was alive and that love, once sown, could endure even the harshest trials. By the time the stars blazed overhead, she was staggering, nearly spent, yet determined. She no longer moved merely to survive. She moved because somewhere, beyond the shimmering horizon, Koa might be searching for her. The thought alone made the difference between giving in to despair and continuing forward. One painful step at a time. In the cruel silence of the desert, love lingered, persistent and unyielding. And for Elena, it had become her only guide through the night. The desert, in all its merciless vastness, had a way of making the improbable feel inevitable. Elena had been wandering for what felt like an eternity, her strength ebbing with every step, when a movement on the horizon drew her attention. At first, she thought it a mirage, a trick of heat and thirst, but the figure held shape. Steady against the burning sky. Her heart leapt before her mind could protest. It was him, Koa. Seemed to slow as she struggled to stand, her legs trembling violently beneath her. Her vision blurred, not entirely from exhaustion, but from disbelief. Could it really be true? Had fate, in its strange mercy, returned him to her at the moment she needed him most? Her mind refused to believe it, even as her body ached for salvation. Koa moved with the silent precision of a seasoned warrior, his eyes scanning the desert as if he had always belonged there. Every step he took spoke of confidence, strength, and determination. Yet when his gaze fell upon her, something softened. Recognition, relief, and a deep, unspoken understanding passed between them. He saw her suffering, her near collapse, the desperate toll the desert had exacted, and he did not falter. Elena's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, the sand clutching her fingers as if begging her to stay. Koa was at her side in an instant, strong hands lifting her effortlessly, cradling her as though she were weightless. The world around her, the sun, the wind, the endless dunes, faded to a blur. All that remained was the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the warmth of his presence, and the realization that she was no longer alone. "Shoo, you're safe now," Koa murmured, his voice a low rumble that seemed to push back the desert itself. His words were gentle but carried authority. They demanded attention, demanded trust. Elena's lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat was raw, her voice stolen by dehydration and fear. She only managed a trembling nod. Koa lowered her to the ground carefully, surveying her battered body with a warrior's precise assessment. Her clothes were torn, her skin burned and blistered, and her eyes held the wild desperation of someone who had stared death in the face. Yet she was alive. That alone mattered. He set to work with practiced skill, undoing what little bindings remained, brushing the sand from her hair and face, and giving her water from a small skin he had carried, water he had saved specifically for this moment. As the liquid touched her lips, Elena's eyes closed, relief and disbelief warring within her. The desert's cruelty had been relentless, but here, in this impossible reunion, a glimmer of hope shimmered. She could taste life again, feel it rush back through her veins, and hear Koa's steady presence beside her. They sat in silence for a moment, the wind whispering around them. Words seemed unnecessary. The desert had taken enough, and now it offered a pause, however fleeting. Koa's gaze never wavered from hers, the intensity of his eyes pulling at memories, regrets, and unspoken emotions. You found me. Elena whispered finally, her voice raw, trembling. How? Koa shook his head, a faint smile brushing his lips. It doesn't matter. I always knew I would. I never stopped searching. There was no accusation in his tone, no bitterness for the past. Only the unwavering certainty that he would not let her die, not now, not ever. Elena's thoughts swirled. With gratitude, relief, and a deep, aching love she had tried to deny. Seeing him again, feeling his presence, brought back everything she had buried. The laughter, the arguments, the tender moments stolen from a world that would not accept their union. And now, in the harsh light of survival, all those memories felt sharper, more urgent. Koa lifted her once more, steadying her on his shoulders as he began to navigate the treacherous desert terrain. The journey was far from over. Danger still lingered, and the desert's trials were not yet complete. But with him at her side, every step forward was a step toward life, toward hope, and toward the possibility of reclaiming what had once been lost. As the stars began to emerge above the endless dunes, Elena realized she could breathe again, not just physically, but in her heart. The warrior who had haunted her dreams, the man she had once loved and thought she had lost forever, was here. And for the first time since she had been abandoned, she believed that survival was not only possible, it was inevitable, as long as Koa remained by her side. The desert night offered little comfort. The stars glittered coldly above, and the wind cut across the sand with sharp insistence. Elena sat beside the small fire Koa had built, her body wrapped in the warmth of his presence, yet her mind a battlefield of emotions. Relief and love battled against anger, guilt, and a sense of betrayal she could not fully shake. Koa was tending the fire, his hands steady, his eyes distant as if scanning the horizon not only for danger but for answers. The silence between them was not peaceful, it was loaded with unspoken words, memories of choices that had shaped their lives, and the ever-present tension of what had been left unsaid for so long. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice brittle but determined. "Why did you leave?" she asked, and almost immediately regretted the words. But the question had been lodged in her throat for years. The pain of their separation, the cruel twist of fate that had kept them apart, demanded acknowledgment. Koa's gaze met hers, calm yet intense. "I didn't leave you," he said quietly. "I had no choice. The world, your world, would never have allowed us." His jaw tightened, and for the first time she saw the depth of the scars that had lingered long after their parting scars he bore silently. Her throat tightened. "I thought I could forget you," she admitted, voice trembling. I thought duty and reason would keep me safe from this, from you, from us, but I was wrong." He stepped closer, the warmth of his body a sharp contrast to the chill of the desert night. "We were never truly apart, Elena, not in my heart, and now—" He let the words hang, heavy with meaning. "Now I find you here, at the edge of death, and I cannot let you go again." Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them back. Anger surged, mingling with relief. "You could have searched for me sooner," she snapped, her voice cracking. "Do you know what it was like to lie in the sand, certain no one would come?" Koa flinched, not from her words, but from the pain they carried. "I searched as soon as I could," he said. "Every day. Every night. I tracked the desert winds, followed rumors, every lead that could bring me to you. I never stopped." His voice was steady, but there was a raw edge to it, the strain of years spent waiting, watching, hoping. Elena's anger faltered, replaced by a profound sadness. The desert had tested them both, but in different ways. She had endured physical torment, near starvation, the betrayal of men she had trusted. He had endured the slow, gnawing torment of separation, the helplessness of being unable to save the one he loved. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across their faces. They both knew that survival in the desert was only the beginning. The real challenge lay in confronting the emotions that had lain dormant for too long. Every glance, every word, every touch reminded them of the love they had once shared and the distance that had been forced between them. Elena reached out tentatively, her hand brushing against his. The contact was electric, sending warmth through her cold, battered body. Koa did not withdraw. He allowed her hand to rest against his, a silent acknowledgment of the bond that neither time nor distance had broken. I should have followed my heart," she whispered. "I should have stayed." Her voice was soft, almost a confession to the desert itself. "You followed the path you believed was right," Koa said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "We both made choices. But none of them changed what we feel. None of them change this moment." The tension between them began to ease, though the memory of past wounds lingered like a shadow in the night. They could not erase the years lost, the betrayals, both of circumstance and choice, but they could begin to rebuild, cautiously, step by step, like survivors tending a fragile fire dot as dawn began to creep across the horizon, painting the desert. In soft hues of gold and rose, Elena felt a flicker of hope. The desert had tried to break her, to isolate her in her suffering. Yet here she was, alive, and beside her was Koa, the one who had never abandoned her in heart, even when fate had tried to keep them apart. The past could not be undone, but it could be acknowledged, healed, and perhaps, in time, forgiven. And as the first light touched the dunes, Elena realized that survival was not only about enduring the desert, it was about facing the wounds within and finding strength to love again. In the silence of the desert, with only the wind as witness, two hearts that had once been torn apart began the delicate process of mending. The desert had given Elena and Koa a brief reprieve, but peace was fragile, and the horizon promised no safety. As the morning sun rose, casting harsh light across the dunes, Koa's sharp eyes scanned the distance. His instincts, honed from years of survival and battle, told him that they were not alone. Elena noticed the subtle tension in his posture, the way his body seemed to coil, ready to spring, the faint narrowing of his eyes. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low but edged with fear. Koa did not answer immediately. He pointed toward the far horizon, where a thin line of dust shimmered in the heat. "They're coming," he said finally, voice grave. "The ones who left you, they haven't forgotten." Elena's stomach turned. The men who had abandoned her, perhaps to cover their own crimes or simply out of cruelty, were closing in. The realization hit her with a cold fury. She had escaped death once, only to face it again, this time pursued by the very people who had tried to kill her before. She clenched her fists, anger and fear intertwining. Koa studied the approaching figures with a measured calm. "We have little time," he said. "The desert will favor them if we do not act wisely. We must use the terrain to our advantage. Move quickly and stay unpredictable." Elena nodded, her mind racing. Despite the desert's relentless trials, she had learned something of survival, of reading the land from Koa's lessons long ago. She recalled the paths he had shown her, the hidden nooks and crags, the way to follow water and shade, even in the harshest sun. Those lessons, once casual guidance, were now their lifeline. They moved together, silent and efficient, Koa leading the way, Elena following closely. Each dune became a shield, each rocky outcrop a vantage point. They crept like shadows, their breaths shallow, hearts pounding in tandem with the rhythm of the desert. Behind them, the dust plume grew larger, betraying the approach of their pursuers. Elena's thoughts churned. They had left her for dead once. Would they show mercy if they caught her now? The desert had already taken its toll on her body, and she knew she could not survive another encounter unprepared. She had to rely on Koa, but also on the knowledge she had gained during the past harrowing days. Koa glanced at her, sensing her inner turmoil. "Focus," he said quietly. "Fear is natural, but hesitation can be fatal. Trust me, as you always have." His words were both a reminder of the past and a lifeline in the present. As the pursuers drew nearer, Koa guided Elena to a narrow canyon, the walls steep and jagged. The path was treacherous but defensible. He gestured for her to stay low while he scouted ahead. From a hidden vantage point, he could see the men more clearly, their weapons glinting in the sun, their movements confident and ruthless. They had underestimated her once, but now Koa would ensure they would not succeed again. Elena crouched behind a boulder, heart racing, trying to steady her breathing. She could hear Koa whispering instructions, each word a thread weaving her survival. The desert, once an enemy, now became an ally, its jagged rocks, shifting sands, and hidden shadows offering them cover. The attackers charged into the canyon, unaware of the ambush waiting for them. Koa moved like a phantom, striking with precision and skill, using the terrain to his advantage. Elena, guided by his calm presence, followed his lead, her fear transforming into determination. Every movement was calculated, every action a fight for survival. The battle was swift, brutal, and decisive. By the time the dust settled, the men who had sought her harm lay defeated, and Elena, though shaken and exhausted, remained alive. The desert had tested them, but together they had endured. Breathing heavily, Elena looked at Koa. Gratitude, awe, and renewed love filled her chest. They had survived the desert's cruelty and the danger on the horizon. But both knew this was not the end. The world beyond the canyon remained unpredictable, and their journey had only just begun. In that moment, however, there was clarity. As long as they faced it together, the desert, its trials, its dangers, and even its betrayals, could not break them. The desert sun had begun its slow descent once more, casting long shadows that stretched across the dunes like ghostly fingers. Elena and Koa had survived the pursuit, but the ordeal had left scars deeper than the ones visible on their skin. Every step forward carried the weight of exhaustion, the lingering echo of danger, and the unspoken tension of past mistakes. They moved cautiously, navigating through narrow canyons and rocky outcrops, each aware that the desert could still turn against them. For Elena, the physical strain was matched by the emotional turmoil. She felt the pull of old memories, regrets, fears, and a love that had never truly faded. Koa, too, carried his own burden, the quiet worry that her heart, tested by betrayal and survival, might close itself to him once more. As night approached, they made camp in a sheltered hollow. Koa worked methodically to build a small fire, its glow pushing back the cold darkness. Elena sat nearby, staring into the flickering flames, feeling the heat on her face while shivering from the wind. Words hung between them, heavy and unspoken, as if the desert itself had demanded silence. Finally, Elena broke it. I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "After everything, after what I've endured, what if I fail again? What if the past? What if it destroys us?" Koa moved closer, kneeling beside her. His eyes held the calm assurance she had relied on so many times before, yet there was vulnerability there, too. "The past is a shadow, Elena," he said softly. "It is not us. What matters is this right here, right now. We survive together. We face what comes together." She looked down, ashamed of her hesitation. "But you could leave again. I could fail you. I could—" Her words faltered, lost in the weight of her fears. Koa placed a steady hand beneath her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. "Listen to me," he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived through war and the unforgiving desert. "I do not leave those I love. I have come for you once, and I will not abandon you now. Fear is natural, but love is stronger than fear, stronger than the desert, stronger than anything we face." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. The sincerity in his words, the certainty, the unwavering devotion, it was more than she had dared to hope for. And yet old wounds still throbbed. Memories of separation, of mistrust, of choices that had torn them apart lingered stubbornly. Love, she realized, was not just a gift. It was a challenge. It demanded courage, honesty, and a willingness to risk the heart again. The desert seemed to lean in, listening as they reached for each other cautiously, hands brushing, fingers entwining. Every contact sparked electricity, a reminder of the bond that had endured despite distance, danger, and time. Yet the test was not over. As the wind picked up, carrying the scent of sand and distant smoke, Elena knew that survival demanded more than courage. It demanded trust. Absolute, unshakable trust. Night deepened, and they sat close together, sharing warmth and silent reassurance. Koa's presence was a fortress around her, a shield against both the harsh desert and the fragility of her own fears. She realized that the trials of the past betrayal, abandonment, the near brush with death were shaping them into something stronger, something more resilient. "I trust you," she whispered finally, not as a promise, but as an acknowledgement of the journey they had endured. "I trust you, and I won't let the past hold me back anymore." Koa's hand tightened around hers, a silent vow. "And I will not let go," he replied, "no matter what comes. The desert has tested us, but it will not break us. Together, we are stronger than any trial, any danger, any fear." The fire crackled, the wind hummed through the rocks, and the stars shimmered above like silent witnesses. In the quiet of the desert, amidst trials and danger, Elena and Koa found a renewed connection tested by fire, strengthened by survival, and tempered by love that refused to fade. They were no longer merely survivors of the desert. They were a united force, hearts intertwined, ready to face whatever the horizon held. And in that moment, both knew, love, when tested and endured, could withstand even the harshest trials. The first light of dawn spilled across the desert, painting the dunes in shades of gold and rose. The night's trials had passed, but the journey was far from over. Elena stood atop a small ridge, the wind tugging at her hair, and looked out at the endless expanse before her. Each grain of sand seemed to whisper the hardship she had endured, the betrayal, the scorching heat, the near brush with death. Yet now, after all she had faced, the horizon felt less threatening and more like a canvas waiting to be shaped. Koa approached quietly, his presence steady and reassuring. He did not speak immediately, letting her gaze take in the vastness of the desert. When he finally did, his voice was low, carrying the weight of experience and the depth of emotion he had kept hidden for years. "It is yours to choose, Elena. The future, your life, your heart. The desert has tested you, but it cannot decide for you." She turned to him, searching his eyes for guidance, yet knowing the choice was hers alone. Their love had been rekindled in the harsh crucible of survival, yet she could not simply let her heart dictate her path without consideration. She had responsibilities, obligations, and a life that had been shaped by society's expectations. And yet, the love she felt for Koa was undeniable, stronger now for all the trials they had endured together. Her mind drifted to the life she had left behind the familiar streets, her family's expectations, the semblance of safety that had once seemed so important. But the desert had stripped her of illusions. She had seen the fragility of human loyalty, the raw forces of nature, and the truth of her own resilience. Life in her old world would offer security, perhaps, but it would never offer the freedom and passion that Koa represented. Koa watched her silently, reading her thoughts with the quiet patience of someone who had waited too long to be near her. He had no demands, no ultimatums. All he offered was presence, love, and the possibility of a shared future. That was enough, more than enough, to give her clarity. Elena inhaled deeply, the desert air filling her lungs with its dry, heady scent. She thought of the nights they had spent surviving together, the moments of fear and triumph, the rediscovery of their bond. Each memory reinforced the truth she had long tried to suppress. She belonged not to a safe, predictable life, but to the life she had found with Koa, wild, uncertain, but real. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but resolute. "Koa, I choose you. I choose us. I will not return to a life that denies the heart. I will follow the path we can carve together, no matter where it leads." A soft smile touched Koa's lips, relief and joy mingling with a quiet strength he always carried. "Then we walk forward together," he said simply, offering his hand. "No past, no regrets, just us and the road ahead." Together they descended the ridge, their steps in sync, moving with the certainty of two hearts. United. The desert stretched endlessly around them, a formidable yet forgiving witness to their choice. Each dune they crossed was a triumph, a symbol of endurance, and a testament to the love that had survived betrayal, death, and fear. As they walked, the sun rose higher, bathing the landscape in warmth. The trials they had faced, the relentless desert, the danger of men who had sought to harm Elena, and the internal struggle of old wounds felt distant, like shadows fading with the morning light. What remained was clarity, a shared future, forged through fire, tempered by endurance, and solidified by love. Elena glanced at Koa, and in his eyes she saw not only the reflection of her own heart, but the promise of endless possibilities. The desert had taught her many things: resilience, patience, and the courage to face the unknown. But above all, it had taught her that love, when chosen freely and nurtured through adversity, could overcome any obstacle. They walked on, hand in hand, leaving behind the trials that had threatened to define them and stepping into a future of their own making. The desert, once a place of near death, had become a symbol of life, strength, and the boundless potential of a love that refused to yield. And in that moment, as the sun climbed higher and the wind carried their footsteps across the sand, Elena understood the truth that had eluded her for so long. The heart knows its path, and when it chooses courage over fear, love over doubt, the possibilities are limitless. Together they faced the horizon not as survivors of the desert, but as architects of their shared destiny.